What a solemn occasion to just by chance be in Washington, D.C. During the week of all of these memorials and honors to our former President George H.W. Bush. What an incredible man. And it was a very solemn occasion to be able to be in the Capitol Rotunda yesterday. Literally thousands of people lined up to pay their respects to President Bush and his family, of course, and dignitaries everywhere. And interestingly, after I was able to do that, I went to dinner and with some friends and ran into Vice President Dan Quayle and had a nice conversation with him and expressed my condolences to him as well. As you know, they were very close, and just a time of reflection, time to feel blessed about our Republican form of government here in America and some of the great leaders like George Bush that we've been blessed to have.
Yeah, of course, Dan Quayle's been back to Montana a time or two. I remember hearing a kind of a legendary story about a visit he paid to Bozeman High School back in the day, and Secret Service was a little worried about all the about guns being in the cars of all the school kids, and the principal, I think, finally told Secret Service, "Hey, look, it's hunting season in Montana. Of course, there's going to be guns in cars." And the agent, I think, said, "We'll just pretend I didn't hear that."
One of the conversations I had with the vice president was two of his favorite places in the world are Glacier National Park and the Bob Marshall Wilderness, and I'm going to be doing a pack trip into the Bob Marshall next summer, and I invited the vice president to come along if he'd like, and Marilyn too. His wife is an intrepid sojourner and has done a lot of outdoor activities, and we exchanged contact information. I'm hoping they take me up on it.
Wow. Well, shoot, if you follow up with him, tell the vice president we'd be honored to talk with him here on Montana Talks as well about, not only his love for these great places in Montana, but also the life and service of President George H.W. Bush. Was there an image that, I don't know if you saw this video, it seemed like it was just incredible. I shared it on my Facebook page, facebook.com/Flint Report, but the image of former Senator Bob Dole, a World War II veteran like President George H.W. Bush, they were pretty strong rivals back in the 1990s, but yet he made sure that he was helped out of his wheelchair so that he could rise, stand, and salute President Bush's casket. Just remarkable. Brings tears to your eyes. I don't know if you saw that, but
it really does. I did see that, and I had the great pleasure of meeting Senator Dole many years ago, and what a fine, interesting gentleman he is, and of course a hero and a patriot. You notice that he saluted with his left arm, and you know the significance of that. I'm not sure your listeners do, though.
Yeah, because of course you always render your salute with the right hand. Some butter bar lieutenants, brand new lieutenants out there, somebody, some seasoned NCOs might play a trick on them by saluting with their left hand as a joke. But in this case, obviously, it's a very serious reason. Bob Dole can't use his right arm, so that was his way of rendering a proper
injured
salute.
While fighting for the United States of America.
Yeah.
Right.
And you could tell the aging Bob Dole as well. I mean, his salute. The other thing is you'd keep all your fingers hard pressed together, straight line. I mean, President Trump had a really great salute that he rendered without military experience at the casket. But I think the fact that Bob Dole's fingers were kind of crinkled because he couldn't hold his hand together made it even more powerful that he was doing everything he could to honor President Bush.
No, what a tremendous honor to have bestowed on our late president to have Senator Dole do that. My Chief Deputy Attorney General, John Bennion, was a presidential fellow, and it's a program that's put on by the presidential museums, I believe, of Clinton, H.W. Bush, and I believe Carter as well.
Yeah.
And so John got to meet both George and Barbara earlier this year before they both passed away. What an incredible honor.
Yeah, what a great opportunity. You talk about Glacier National Park. The Hungry Horse News had an incredible photograph of the two of them camping in Glacier back in the early 80s. We'll talk more with Montana's Attorney General Tim Fox from Washington, D.C. right after this quick news, weather, and weather break. Yeah, so Attorney General Fox, you're back in Washington, D.C., actually for kind of a bipartisan fellowship program, but in the midst of it, get to be there as our nation honors and remembers former President George H.W. Bush. What were some of the other sights and imagery that stood out to you while you were there walking around our nation's capital?
Well, I've been to the nation's capital many times. I've been in the rotunda many times. It seems like each time I'm in there, there's some sort of event going on. It's very loud, a lot of rigmarole going on. And to walk into the rotunda yesterday and you could hear a pin drop. It was that quiet. People of all ages. One little kid that was standing there saluting the president, pretty poignant. And I saw on the internet earlier in the day there was a Boy Scout that was apparently saluting the president.
Yeah, great picture there, too.
People of all walks of life. And, whether you were a Republican or a fan of the president's or even were alive while he was president, I think it's just one of those things about America and the opportunities we have here to fully understand just how blessed we are with our form of government. And so just a very solemn occasion. And, of course, the Capitol all lit up, the flags at half-staff. And I think today the president called a national day of mourning, right? And
yeah. Yep, post offices are shut down. Federal government largely shut down. Yeah. Yeah.
So anyway, just it was somewhat of a coincidence. I was actually here when Associate Justice Scalia, Antonin Scalia, passed away, and I know his one of his kids, and she invited me to the funeral mass, and so I ended up staying over for that, and then she invited me to the memorial service, which was the following week. So I just worked out of Washington, D.C. for a week. And that, again, was just by coincidence. I don't know. The stars must be aligned here, but I hate to see great Americans passing away, but there are plenty of new generations coming up. Hopefully many people will take stock in the lessons learned and the life lived by people like George Bush, and we'll try to emulate that and put that in their life and become our future leaders.
And he's going out the same way he carried himself his entire life, with class. Former President George H.W. Bush. Is there one thing that stood out to you the most, either whether it's his legacy as president or his legacy as a public servant? How do you remember George H.W. Bush?
Well, it's interesting. I remember the Gulf War, the first Gulf War, and being riveted by the radio, and then when I get home from work, by the TV, and listening to all of that, and the great resolve that he had for the citizens of other countries, and seeing that. You're a military guy, Aaron, and you've been in harm's way, and no president, I believe, ever takes that lightly. But in times of conflict and big challenges like that, we have to have leaders like George H.W. Bush, and thankfully we did, and we have, and hopefully our country will in the future. So
yeah,
that was one of my main memories, was the Gulf War and his response in standing up to tyranny with people such as Saddam Hussein.
Yeah, and I think we kind of, as a nation, in large part, took for granted how great of a military victory that was. I was just a kid back then, but I remember the remarkable shock and awe, and it seemed, at least as a kid, it seemed relatively quick. But I know for those who were serving at the time in Desert Storm, it wasn't easy. That's for sure. It wasn't quick and easy for those who were deployed overseas at the time. For those veterans that I've talked with, Attorney General Tim Fox, always a pleasure. Thanks so much for calling in here last minute. Safe travels as you continue your trip in Washington, D.C.